On that night, Zion did not merely burn like a defeated city. It burned like a heart torn out of the chest of its own people. Flames crawling through every alleyway, every ancient stone wall, every rooftop that had sheltered generations. And in that suffocating darkness, Baruch stood still among the ashes, his eyes stinging from smoke, sorrow, and the helplessness of watching the holy city turn into a sea of embers, the last cries echoing through the wind like final farewells, a child calling for its mother through broken sobs, a mother clutching a charred cloth, whispering that it belonged to her son, an old man trembling as he picked up a stone from the temple wall they believed could never fall. And Baruch, amid all this grief, could only lift his gaze to the purple-black sky and wonder whether God was watching, whether he was silent or mourning with them, and why the righteous, the gentle, the honest, the ones who kept the law, suffered in the very same ruin as the wicked, why the cruel laughed as Zion crumbled, why justice seemed to walk so slowly while suffering fell like lightning, leaving him alone in a landscape that made no sense. And in that moment, Baruch was no longer just a figure from ancient scripture, but a reflection of each of us, in the moments when our own world collapses, when what we trusted shatters into dust, when the hardest questions have no answers, when we ask why heaven does not save the innocent or protect the kind, why goodness is swallowed so easily by cruelty. And on that night when Zion burned like the cry of a nation, Baruch's story became a voice reaching across centuries to touch the quiet exhaustion inside every human heart today. And if you are listening to this now, stay with me until the end, because the journey Baruch is about to take is not only his journey, it is ours too, a path seeking meaning through the ruins of life. And if this story stirs something within you, don't forget to subscribe so you can follow me through this sacred and profound journey. In the moment Baruch believed the heavens had gone silent, that God had turned his face away from his people, it was precisely then, in the vast stillness of a dying night, that a voice rose, soft as a breath, yet heavy as thunder. Baruch, do not fear. What you see is not the end, for nothing collapses without my knowing it. No stone falls without my seeing it, and no tear of the innocent touches the earth without being remembered. You are looking at the surface of suffering, but I see the roots of the soul. I allowed Zion to fall not to destroy it, but to rebuild what generations have forgotten. And Baruch stood frozen, chest tightening as if someone had touched the deepest wounded place within him. For all this time, he thought he had been abandoned, that the sky had closed its ears to the plea of the righteous. Yet the voice continued, Baruch, you and your people are not suffering to be swallowed. You suffer to awaken. You are not disciplined to be cast aside. But so, you do not drift from the covenant your ancestors sealed with their lives. And in the glow of embers still breathing on the ground, Baruch suddenly felt small, like a lost child, finally meeting a hand on his shoulder, reassuring him that nothing is over, that even when the holy city crumbles, the presence of God still stands there, silent but never absent, stern but never cold. And the storyteller whispers, our lives are often the same. When everything breaks, we think heaven has gone quiet, but that silence is often the moment when the answer is forming. Not an answer to soothe for a moment, but one that leads us to a new path, where loss becomes the foundation for a greater resurrection. Baruch stood amid the dim glow of dying flames, clinging to the charred stones, and inside him rose a restlessness he could no longer contain, a deeply human ache that anyone who has watched the best parts of their life crumble in a single moment would understand. He lifted his eyes toward the smoke-soaked sky and spoke, "Lord, I have heard your voice. I know every ruin rests within your design. Yet I must ask, why do the gentle suffer beside the wicked? Why do the kind-hearted, the humble, the ones who lit lamps each night praying for peace in their homes, bear the same bitter fate as those who sowed violence? Why did their prayers not protect their roofs? Why did their faith not shield their children? Why did their loyalty to the covenant not preserve them?" Baruch did not shout, but his voice trembled like a man trying not to collapse. And within his question lived the grief of an entire people, and also the grief of anyone who has ever seen life turn upside down in an instant. Families who lost everything in a storm, parents who buried their children, good people who carried kindness like a light, but still tasted the cold edge of hardship. And in that pain, we do not accuse heaven. Yet we cannot help but ask, because only humans dare to ask such things. Only those who love deeply dare to demand an answer for suffering. Baruch continued, "Lord, if you desire to teach us, why teach through sorrow? If you wish to bring us back to covenant, why let the holy city burn to its roots? Why not spare the righteous, so they might be seeds for hope?" And as Baruch spoke, it was as if the night wind stopped to listen, for he was not rebelling against God. He was struggling to understand him. Like a child asking a father, why growth must come with pain. Like someone standing in a wreckage of their life, searching for a meaning strong enough to keep them upright. The storyteller whispers, "Not everyone dares to question God the way Baruch did, for many fear that asking will break their faith. Yet sometimes the question is, what keeps faith alive? For only those who still hope seek explanation, and only those who still believe in goodness feel injustice as something unbearable." So in that moment, Baruch was not weak. He was the strongest of all. A man brave enough to stand amid ashes and still yearn to understand the will of heaven. And if you too have ever held a loss that shook your soul, stay with this story, because the answer Baruch is about to receive is not only for him, it may be for you as well. Baruch stood still as the voice from heaven rose again, slow and steady, as if each word was placed gently to hold up his trembling heart. "Baruch, what you see today is not an unexpected disaster. Zion did not collapse in one night. It weakened over generations, when hearts drifted from truth, when justice faded, when the warnings of prophets were pushed aside. And God did not speak with anger, but with a sorrow so deep it felt like the grief of a father, watching the child he loves lose its strength little by little. And Baruch sensed in that voice not only the authority of the Most High, but also the ache of a heart that had endured too much patience. The voice continued, "I sent signs, reminders, moments meant to stir your souls. Yet when a people no longer hear the call to return, collapse is no longer punishment. It becomes an unavoidable consequence." Hearing this, Baruch felt someone had pressed gently into his own wound, for he understood that this ruin did not begin with fire. It began on the days people forgot each other, forgot mercy, forgot righteousness, and the storyteller whispers, "Our lives are the same." Very few tragedies arrive in a single moment. They begin with small cracks we ignore, with times we are tired and choose convenience, with choices that seem harmless, but gather into storms, and the voice of God continued, "I did not allow Zion to fall to destroy it, but so it may be rebuilt upon a foundation that truly belongs to me. Because sometimes, to revive a soul, I must let it pass through ashes." And as Baruch heard this, his heart softened, like someone finally understanding that collapse is not always an ending. Sometimes, it is the opening chapter of something better. And the storyteller concludes, "So if you are listening now and have lived through a ruin that nearly broke you, remember that some falls are foretold not to crush you, but to save you from a darker path." And Baruch's journey stands as proof of that truth. As the voice from heaven faded into silence, Baruch returned to the valley of Cedron, where the survivors gathered like a flock scattered by a storm, each holding a fragment of a life recently burned away. There was a young mother sitting numb beside a mound of ashes, still clutching a scorched wooden frame she believed belonged to her home, her eyes dry but her grief spilling silently from her chest. Beside her, an old man trembled while holding a stone he had picked from the fallen temple wall, whispering to himself, "This is my memory. I must keep it." The children curled in their mother's arms, unable to understand why the world had suddenly become so frightening. And Baruch walked among them, feeling the ache of every soul pressing into his own heart. He said nothing, for some sorrows are so large that words only make them heavier. Instead, he placed his hand gently on each shoulder, as if telling them they were not alone. The storyteller whispers, "The valley of Cedron that day did not only hold ashes, it held the spirits of people clinging to the last thread of hope. Some lifted their faces to the sky in accusation. Some searched their lives for meaning. Some held their loved ones, wishing tomorrow would be less cruel." And Baruch watched them all and realized that the fall of Zion was not just a story of stones, but of hearts torn open. And in that landscape soaked in tears, he understood that people are not strong because they never cry. They are strong because they rise again through their tears. The storyteller continues, "In each of our lives, there is a valley like Cedron, a place where we must gather the broken pieces of ourselves to move forward, where tears do not make us weaker, but make us more real." And if you are listening to this during a season when everything feels like it is falling apart, stay with this story. Because Baruch's journey does not end here, and somewhere in it, there is hope meant for you. That night, as the valley of Cedron drifted into a sleep woven with tears, Baruch sat alone beneath a broken olive tree, his heart so heavy that even the wind passing by sounded like the earth sighing. Then suddenly, in the faint remaining glow of dying embers, a vision opened before him. First came a vast forest, towering trees stretching as if to pierce the sky, their canopies so thick that no light could slip through. Each tree standing proud like a mighty empire, strong, unshakable, seemingly eternal. And Baruch watched them feeling small, lost, like a human standing among forces far greater than anything he could control. But in the midst of that overwhelming forest, a tiny vine sprouted, so delicate it looked as though a single breeze might break it. Yet strangely, it grew, slowly, stubbornly, like a righteous soul refusing to fade, even when surrounded by darkness. The storyteller whispers, "Sometimes in life, the weakest thing is the one that endures." Baruch kept watching until a clear stream burst from the earth. Its flow gentle, but filled with undeniable force. And the water swept away the massive trees, uprooting giants with a quiet inevitability, as though the strength of the forest had never been real at all, leaving the small vine standing alone in the light. And that sight felt like a whisper from heaven, telling him that empires and powers, which seem invincible, will one day be carried away by something small but rooted in goodness. Baruch understood that the stream was the hand of God, subtle yet powerful enough to shake the world. And the storyteller concludes, this vision was not only for Baruch, but for all of us, reminding us that greatness is not always found in overwhelming strength, but in the quiet endurance of what is good, of the small faith we hold on to through storms. And if you feel fragile now, remember that the little vine remained when the whole forest fell. After the vision of the forest and the stream faded, Baruch sat still like a man returning from a dream. He was not ready to leave, but before he could even breathe deeply, another scene opened before him, so strange and sacred that his heart tightened, as if his soul sensed he was about to be shown a secret his people had forgotten for generations. He saw before him a vast sea, not a real sea, but a sea made of time, each current shining with a different color, some bright like morning light, some dark like a moonless night. And the voice from heaven spoke, "Baruch, these are the 12 waters of history. Each water is a season, a spiritual age, a breath of our people, and each water tells the truth. Humans seldom want to hear that light and darkness have always interwoven within the destiny of mankind." Baruch watched closely as the first bright water flowed out, gentle and pure. The season of innocence, when the people walked close to the covenant, when hearts still trembled before what was holy, when souls knew where to rest. Then a dark water surged forward, thick like sorrow, speaking of the days when warnings of the prophets were ignored, when mercy was forgotten, when the first small mistakes cast long shadows over the years to come. The storyteller whispers, our lives also contain such waters, small choices shifting slightly off course, until one day they gather into consequences far larger than we imagined. Baruch saw the next bright water rising, the time of David, the time of Solomon, the age when justice echoed through the streets of Jerusalem, when festivals lit the nights, when songs rose like prayer, and people felt joy so real it was almost tangible. Then the third dark water crashed down like a heavy storm, bringing rebellion, idols, war, hunger, cries buried under cold earth. The failures of kings not only destroying themselves, but dimming the hope of their people. Baruch watched these waters rise and fall like the heartbeat of a nation, and he understood that God did not reveal this to condemn, but to remind that history is never only darkness or only light. It moves in arcs, rising and falling, flourishing and fading. And this truth helps humans endure their darkest hours, knowing another current of light will come. The voice continued, Baruch, each water exists because of human choices. Light does not appear by luck, and darkness does not come from abandonment. Your people lived through both, and that has deepened their soul. Baruch felt his heart ease, as if he finally understood that a nation is like a person, blessed with seasons of brilliance, lost in seasons of wandering, sometimes drawing close to goodness, sometimes slipping away because of temptations small but persistent. And the storyteller concludes, if you are listening and see your own life in these bright and dark waters, remember that in Baruch's vision, all waters eventually flow to one place, where light rises with its greatest strength. And that is the promise heaven gives to those who keep walking. When the sixth bright water appeared before Baruch, he felt as if he had been carried back to a time when even the sky over Jerusalem seemed to shine more gently. It was the era of David and Solomon, a time when every street echoed with music and song, when people believed justice was not just a teaching but the very breath of the nation. Baruch saw days when homes were built with diligent hands and eyes full of hope. Afternoons when people gathered at the city gates to hear King David speak about kindness, about how a people are bound not by power, but by loyalty to what is good. Then the vision shifted to the dedication of Solomon's temple, where thousands knelt at once, lifting their hands toward heaven with absolute reverence. And Baruch heard the resonance of their prayers, merging into a sacred harmony, like the heartbeat of an entire nation beating as one. The storyteller whispers, in each of our lives there are such seasons of light, seasons when we walk honestly, when our hearts are peaceful, when every step feels weightless, as if life itself is smiling at us. Baruch saw children running around the temple courts, their laughter stretching far like a promise of a brighter tomorrow. He saw fathers teaching their sons how to honor what is right, how to keep a clean heart even when the world shifts. He saw mothers gathering the hearts of their families in the glow of evening lamps, reminding them that peace is never accidental. It is the harvest of lives that guard their souls against temptation. And Baruch understood that this bright water was not merely a memory, but a reminder that his people once had a beautiful foundation, that light was never a distant luxury, but something they had touched, lived within, and guarded with devotion. The storyteller concludes, if you are listening and feel that your life once had a season of peace, a season of quiet beauty that later storms swept away, remember that light never truly disappears. It simply steps back for a moment, waiting for you to return. Just like the bright water in Baruch's vision, still flowing even when the longest night has fallen. Right after the bright and radiant waters of David and Solomon, Baruch saw a dark stream surge forward, thick like years of accumulated bitterness. It was the era of Jeroboam and Jezebel, the days when justice was buried beneath ambition, when the voices of prophets were ignored. Baruch saw crowds flocking to foreign shrines, burning incense to gods whose names they did not even know, simply because their hearts had drifted. He saw children following their parents, unaware that they were walking away from the light. The storyteller whispers, this too is something that happens easily in a human life. When we are tired, wounded, or lose faith in goodness, we run toward things that seem comforting, but only darken the soul further. Baruch saw homes shattered by war, fields cracked open by drought, mothers covering their faces while the cries of their hungry children slowly faded, and men standing still like stone, watching their homeland split apart. And he understood that this darkness did not fall from the sky, but rose from human choices, from the times people knew what was wrong, but still embraced it, knew what was right, but abandoned it, knew they were losing themselves, but refused to rise. God showed Baruch Jezebel, the powerful woman who dragged a nation into idolatry, who hunted prophets, who squeezed the light of faith as if crushing it in her hands. And Baruch shuddered as he witnessed the tears of those who still believed in goodness, but were treated as weak. The storyteller murmurs, "In our own lives, there are seasons when darkness surrounds us so tightly, we think there is no escape. Yet it is in those moments that we truly feel the value of light." Baruch watched the dark waters rise with a pain that cut deep, but he knew that unless his people faced the truth of their past, they would never reclaim their future. And the storyteller concludes, "If you are listening and feel you have lived through such dark seasons, remember that the dark waters are only one part of the story. Behind them still flow the bright waters. You can return to the moment you choose what is right." When Baruch reached the 11th dark water, a cold shiver ran down his spine, as if his own soul recognized that this was a most devastating season in his people's history. The water was so black that even sunlight seemed to dim when it touched it. And then the vision unfolded, showing Zion being trampled without mercy by those who came from distant lands, iron boots striking the very streets, once filled with laughter and the footsteps of children, now drowned in the roar of collapsing walls and the triumphant shouts of conquerors. Baruch saw thick columns of smoke rising from the temple, the smoke that for generations had symbolized the holy presence of God, now replaced by the smoke of desecration, cruelty, and the twisted pride of those who worshipped strange idols. He saw foreign statues erected among the ruins of Jerusalem, and strangers laughing as they declared their gods victorious. Baruch even heard the cries of angels, the very beings who once defended Israel in battles, now standing helpless as Zion was handed over to its enemies, and their weeping pierced him deeper than any blade could. The narrator whispers softly, "There are moments in life so painful that a person no longer knows whether to cry or stay silent, for both feel too small compared to the enormity of the sorrow." Baruch saw mothers clutching their children as they fled through rubble, saw fathers placing themselves between soldiers and their families despite knowing they could not win, saw elders collapsed before the ashes of their homes, unable to speak because grief had swallowed all words, and he understood that this was not only the fall of a city, but the breaking of a shared memory, a pride nurtured over centuries. God showed Baruch all of this not to drown him in despair, but to make him understand that the darkness had not come suddenly. It had been built slowly from years of forgetting the covenant, forgetting compassion, forgetting themselves. The storyteller murmurs, "In our own lives, there are seasons like this when everything collapses at once, when what we believed unshakable crumbles in the hands of others, when we doubt whether we can stand again." Baruch fell to his knees in the vision, unsure what to pray for, except that God might see the suffering of his people. And in that silence that felt almost hopeless, he understood that before light returns, darkness often reaches its deepest point. And it is in that depth that true faith is tested and refined. And if you are listening now and feel that life has crushed you, the way Zion was crushed in Baruch's vision, stay with this story, because the moment after the 11th darkness is when the first stirrings of light begin their return. And if this journey is touching something in your heart, Consider subscribing so you do not miss the chapters where hope finally rises. As the 11th darkness slowly withdrew, Baruch saw a faint thread of light appear at the edge of his vision. Fragile at first, like a candle trembling in the wind. Yet the longer he looked, the more it grew, widening, strengthening, until the whole sky seemed to open, and a voice rose. Baruch, do not fear, for after the darkest seasons comes the final light. Not the light kindled by human hands, but the light born from resurrection and judgment. Baruch saw the righteous, those who had been overlooked, mistreated, or pushed aside, rise from the dust with a radiance that made their past suffering look like a distant dream. Their eyes shone with a peace, untouched by any wound. And he heard God say, "What they lost, I will return in greater measure. What they endured, I will turn into glory." He saw souls once buried under injustice being lifted like seeds meeting new rain. The storyteller whispers, our own lives are like this too. The quiet good we do, the kindness no one sees, the patience no one applauds, none of it is ever wasted. Then Baruch saw the wicked standing in that same light, and it did not rage or roar. It simply revealed everything, schemes, lies, hidden deeds, long thought forgotten. Baruch understood judgment was not blind punishment, but truth, returning to its rightful place. He watched the old world dissolve like morning mist, making way for a new one rising like a sunrise after a violent storm, where the righteous would live in peace, and tears would no longer be daily bread. Baruch stood within that light, feeling warmth spread through him, as though heaven itself whispered that every small, honest effort carries weight, that no tear shed in sincerity is ever meaningless. And if you are listening to this during difficult days, remember the final light always arrives, sometimes late, but never breaking its promise. So stay with this journey, and if this story touches your heart, consider subscribing so you do not miss the chapters where the light continues to unfold. Baruch watched the light spreading and suddenly heard the voice of God, distant yet touching something very close within his heart. Baruch, the youth of the world has passed. The strength of creation has grown weary, and this age is nearing its end. The words stilled him, not out of fear, but out of the realization that even the world can grow old. Just like a person who has endured too many storms and becomes quieter with time, Baruch saw mountains that once stood firm, now covered with a faint sadness. Fields once fertile, now carrying the tiredness of long labor. And he understood that the world does not age because time moves. It ages because of the wounds humanity leaves upon it. The storyteller whispers, each of us has moments like that too, when we look back and find our hearts no longer as clear as they once were. When weariness settles in after disappointments, broken promises, and love that never found its full shape, Baruch heard God continue, "But though the world has grown old, the soul of the righteous will always be renewed. For the aging of the earth cannot drain the hope of those who seek the light." And Baruch felt a soft calm rising within him, like someone realizing that exhaustion is not an ending, but a reminder to live slower, truer, and closer to what is good. And if you are listening now and feel your own life has grown tired after many storms, remember that a heart that chooses goodness never truly ages, and the path ahead still holds light waiting for you. When the final visions faded, Baruch sat beside a flickering oil lamp and began writing a letter to the survivors, a message from a heart that had walked through ashes, yet still carried the warmth of hope. He wrote, "To my brothers and sisters who did not fall, you have not suffered to be abandoned. You have suffered so your souls might remember their worth. He said that God hid nothing. He foretold that the world would grow old, that darkness would come, but that light would return to those who guard even the smallest flame within their hearts." Baruch wrote about the hardships they had endured, the children who lost their parents, the mothers who lost their homes, the men who stood between grief and responsibility. And he reminded them that not one of their tears was wasted, for heaven had seen them all, the storyteller whispers. This letter felt like the words of someone who had suffered, who had lost much, yet refused to lose faith in goodness. Baruch urged them to prepare their souls, to live with integrity, not to let yesterday's despair steal tomorrow's future. He told them they must walk as those who will inherit the light, not as those swallowed by the shadows. He told them to pass this story to their children and grandchildren, not to plant fear, but to plant awareness, so that the next generation would protect what their ancestors had forgotten. Baruch ended the letter with a gentle yet powerful truth, that as long as a human heart opens itself to what is right, no night is ever truly endless. And if you are listening to this now, remember that the greatest comfort often comes from those who have once hurt the way you hurt. So stay with this journey, because the final chapter is still waiting for you.